Hello everyone, welcome to our channel, Persimmons and Paperbacks.
My name is Ellie.
And I'm AJ, and we're really excited today to do a 22 favorites of 2022 video, where we're gonna just talk about our favorite books that we read this year. And yeah, just kind of gonna do 11 each, and we're just gonna go back and forth and share. And I think we have pretty different tastes as well, so I think it'll be pretty interesting. And yeah, I guess for my year, I think I had a pretty interesting reading year, and definitely I would say probably the best reading year that I've ever had. I read almost 80 books and definitely a wide variety of genres. There was some manga, some autobiographies, definitely a lot of fantasy and fiction and romance, which are kind of my favorite genres mainly. So yeah, I'm really excited to share some of those today.
Yeah. And as for me, I also had, I think, the best reading year I've ever had since maybe elementary school. And so I read 70 books, and my most common genres were contemporary, romance, fiction, and memoir. So yeah, I guess we can dive into it with a memoir, actually. And this is the only book that's on both of our favorites lists, and that is Stay True by Hua Su. It's a book that we picked up in December, and we both really enjoyed.
Yeah, and it's funny because we kind of did so completely independently, but when I was reading it, I texted Ellie and I was like, oh my gosh, I think you would love this book, and she happened to be reading it already. So yeah, it was really great. I guess I think some of the reasons why it was so great for us was just because it had a lot of themes of obviously just Asian Americanness, and the author Hua Su grows up in California and the Bay Area, and describes a lot of I don't know, his feelings of going to college and feeling kind of like an outcast, and wanting to establish his own taste in music and books and things. And I felt that was really relatable. And even though this book was his life, and he's probably 20 plus years older than us,
yeah,
it still was it felt like my thoughts literally put on paper. So I was wow, that's really cool. And I think yeah, I definitely really enjoyed it. And I guess the premise is that he is talking about a college classmate who he had, who passed away in a tragic accident when they were in college at UC Berkeley, and kind of how he navigates that situation, and their kind of beginning of the friendship and the development of the friendship, and the eventual really tragic death, obviously, and kind of the lingering feelings of that as well.
Yeah. I think for me, one of the things that really resonated with me was how he talks about feeling the grief so much later in his life. And I especially appreciate that he includes his experience going to therapy and talking about it, because I think that's often left out of a lot of grief stories. But other than that, like you said, I really resonated with it, especially as someone who grew up Asian on the West Coast and didn't have a lot of experiences with other AAPI people growing up. And then I also ended up going to college in the Bay Area. So I think a lot of that was really relatable. And I thought that, his story about growing up, especially when having such a close friend be killed in a horrible tragedy, is just so powerful. And
yeah, really, really great book. Would definitely recommend if you enjoy memoirs especially, but also just his prose is super, super beautiful. And he's also a writer for the New Yorker now, and I don't know, does a lot of cool stuff. So yeah, would definitely recommend that book. Do you want to do the next book?
Sure. So one of my favorite books this year was This Is How You Lose the Time War by Max Gladstone and Amal El-Notar. And I just loved this book from start to finish. I think it's a little bit difficult to get into. So to set up the premise, basically there's a time war between these two sides, and there are two time-traveling agents who are both trying to go through time and space and best the other side. And the story is told through letters from each other, and eventually through sending these letters to each other, they end up falling in love. And I think this is such a resonant sapphic romance, because not only is the prose very beautiful and at times really poetic, you can tell that El-Notar is a poet from the way that she writes, But I think that it's just such a compelling story and just really gripping from start to finish. And it just seems so strange that it's a novella because it's so short, but when you're reading it, you're like experiencing, I guess, like such a long passage of time. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, like that was Ellie's like one of her favorite like 3 books that she gave me, and we kind of did like an exchange of like our favorite 3 books. So in a future video we'll be doing kind of like a swapping our taste and like our 5-star reads, just because I think we have like some overlap in taste, but like definitely some differences for sure. But yeah, the next book I'll be talking about is perhaps my favorite book of the year, but I might say that about various books, and that is this beautiful, stunning book right here, Babel, I'm not sure, by R.F. Kuang. And yeah, I technically did finish this over the 2023 like New Year's, but I'm still counting it because I like feel the need to talk about it all the time. But yeah, the premise of this book, if you haven't heard about it already, is this institute called the Babel Institute in Oxford. So it's like epic fantasy kind of like fiction book. However, like a lot of the elements of Oxford's history and colonization are all very true to history. However, like this institute, Babel, doesn't exist in real life. It's a fictional institute of language where like translators and people from across the world come to work on translations and language. And in this world, like the way that a lot of the world like derives its like energy is through like these silver bars. So basically, in each silver bar, there's like 2 sides of the bar, and if you're like essentially like a native speaker and you can like do like between 2 like different words, you can translate the meanings. There's like certain like powers and things that can come out of that. I don't know if I did a good job explaining that, but it's really, really cool. Like it's just a really interesting book, very like dark academia. And yeah, you follow Robin Swift, who's like the main character, and he's from Canton, which is like modern day like Guangzhou, and like he comes to Oxford and England and navigates being a student. And the book is also set in like the, I believe, 1830s, so like in Britain at this time. Like imperialism, colonization is in full force, and because he is like non-white, but he is like actually white passing because, or he's sometimes white passing because he is actually half Chinese and half white. He definitely is like mistreated, and like yeah, you definitely see like racism within the like academic institution, but also yeah, it's just like this beautiful like masterpiece essentially of like I guess like history and the elements of this time period and colonization. And you see this main character as he navigates like friendship and making friends for the first time. And also there's like the author R.F. Kuang is also like, I believe like she like has many hats, but she's like a linguist, so a lot of the stuff in it has like footnotes that are like really detailed and basically like talk about different translations, especially from like Mandarin to English, which is like her primary like other language besides English that she speaks. But yeah, would really recommend. Definitely like since reading this book, I haven't found a book that I liked even like close to as much, and that's been like kind of hard because I feel like I was kind of riding the high of this like huge piece that's like yeah, really truly like beautiful and like really eye-opening. I think especially like having recently come out of like a institute of higher learning, even if in the US, like definitely a lot of questions that I had been thinking a lot about in college and had always kind of felt about like academia as well. But yeah, I could talk about this book forever, but definitely my top 3, probably #1 book of the year, I would say, and would really recommend it to anyone. Yeah.
Okay, so my next favorite book is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, which actually this is my first Toni Morrison book since like required reading in high school. And I have to say, it really hits different when you're not forced to read it as a 14-year-old.
What did you have to read in high school?
I read Sula in English class. And I have to say, I think that even though like nothing nearly as tragic happens to me as like Piccola Breedlove in The Bluest Eye, I think this book was so resonant with me, not just because Toni Morrison is literally a genius and her writing is just spectacular, but I distinctly remember having thoughts like that growing up, where I would just think, you know, if only I had blue eyes, like if only I was lighter, like things would be a lot better. And I think it was just a little bit shocking to see that on the page and to see it so explored. And honestly, I just like can't believe that I didn't pick up this book sooner, because it was just such an amazing read.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny that you said that, because I read The Bluest Eye for required reading in high school, but haven't read, oh, actually I've read Beloved, but I haven't read like Sula or any of Toni Morrison's like other works, but
Yeah.
I think I probably was like too young to also process it, and growing up in like a super white school was probably just like really stupid and didn't know how to like navigate a lot of the things. But I do remember it being like really just shocking and like painful, but also like really cool, like resonant as well. All right, so the next book I have 3 romance books in my top 11. So one of them is Real by Kennedy Ryan. And yeah, we live in the like Chicago area, and I literally just randomly picked this up from my favorite like used bookstore in Chicago, called Open Books, and yeah, it was incredible, amazing. Basically the premise is there's a film director named Cannon Holt who is casting for this big film that he's creating, and he's like pretty well known in like the Black film industry, especially in Hollywood. And he goes to like this play randomly and sees Neva Saint, who happens to just be like the understudy and taking like the main lead for that night. And he's like immediately like enthralled by just kind of like the gut-wrenching emotion that she has in the play, and just kind of how raw and like, I don't know, he was like immediately like, this is the person I need to cast for my movie, right? So he's like definitely finds like attraction to her, but also he's had a previous incident where he dated like a main lead in one of his films, and that kind of like went to shit. So like he's kind of just essentially like, okay, like even though I'm attracted to her, like she's so talented, this film is like this amazing story of Black history that I'm trying to represent on the screen, I think will change a lot of lives, like I'm going to put aside my feelings. And definitely like a lot of tropes, like classic tropes, like he's kind of grumpy and she's more sunshine. They're definitely like yeah, I don't know, like it was definitely like a slow burn, and like I don't know, like forbidden love obviously as well, but it was just done so perfectly. And like I don't know, the banter, the premise, like I was really interested in like both of their jobs and like what they were doing and the projects they were working on, and they were kind of working on it together as well. And I think it was just like a very satisfying read, and it was also like spicy and like had all the good qualities that I would like from a romance book. So literally cannot complain. And I've read a couple of her other books, I think, but nothing has really hit like Real. But if you haven't checked it out, I would definitely check it out. Yeah,
I definitely get a lot of Kennedy Ryan recommended to me on like
she had like that one book, Never, like that's like the orange copy, and it's like Never Let Her Go or something like that. And I've heard really mixed reviews, but I am obsessed with this book, so yeah, would recommend this one. Yeah,
I guess like going into the tropes but done really well, one of my favorite books from this year in the romance and YA categories, which I don't know, I feel like I haven't been reading a lot of YA recently, but I really loved it, was I Kissed Shara Wheeler by Casey McQuiston. And I have to say, I have read both of their other books. Like I read Red, White, and Royal Blue when it first came out, and I also read One Last Stop in the beginning of this past year. And I liked them a lot, obviously. However, like I feel like I Kissed Shara Wheeler, like they really popped off with this one, because I think it was just so, the writing was just so amazing. Like I don't even know what to say. Like I think both of the previous books felt a little bit like not as real, I guess, and a lot of the emotions that they were feeling, I felt like were a little bit dimmed versus in this book, like, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just because they remember that being a teenager is just like all of your emotions are heightened to the max or whatever. But I just thought it was so well done, especially for a YA. And I think that because it's basically covering, the main characters are queer teens who live in the Bible Belt, and specifically the main character is like a bi girl who moved from California to the Bible Belt. I think that it's really important for I guess the genre, because a lot of the times, like when these stories happen, it's like in, I guess, areas where there's a lot more acceptance for different gender and sexual identities. And I think that it explores a lot, like exploration for teens who, you know, grew up in these areas and didn't even know that it was an option to, you know, to like identify as another gender, even if they feel all of the feelings that have to do with identifying with a different gender than like what they were assigned at birth. And I also just really like the romance between the main character and Shara Wheeler, who is in the book. Maybe that's a spoiler, but I feel like the title says it all.
Yeah.
And I think that it's also kind of nice as a mystery because Shara ends up leaving all of these little hints for the people that she's kissed to try to find her. And so I just think that even though, again, like there were a lot of tropes with like, oh, like the bad boy, like the football captain, football player, like the prom queen, like the outcast, like goth girl, it just like all came together so well, and it was done so well, and it was definitely like a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, that sounds very cute. Yeah. All right, moving on to, I think, the 7th book, if I can count correctly. I'm gonna go with another romance. And the book that I'm gonna go with is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. So yeah, the premise of this book, and it's also another Black romance, is that there are 2 writers. One is named Eva Mercy, and she writes erotica. And yeah, she is at a literary event, and basically she's being interviewed on a panel, and then someone from her past, his name is Shane Hall, happens to be at that panel as well, and like sparks fly, and things like progress from there. And it is like a second chance romance, which like I'm a sucker for second chance. I don't know why exactly, but that is like one of my favorite tropes. Like, and if it's done right, like Our Beloved Summer style, like I literally eat that shit up. Like I think it's amazing. And I don't know, like I think that they were like constantly, like, I don't know if this is a spoiler, but they were giving soulmate throughout the book. Like it was like they had grown up together and only spent, like, as the title alludes, like 7 days in June together as teenagers, but like decades later they are writers. And this was in the Goodreads like description, so I feel like I can say this, but they write books, and they write books to each other. So like even though they're like famous authors in different genres, like they literally are basically writing to each other, and only they know about it. And it was like, I was like literally like mind blown and like emotionally unwell. So I like really enjoyed this book, and I think their communication and just like the build up and the banter and just like, again, like I don't know, they just felt like 2 very whole humans. And even though they had trauma and like a lot of stuff going on, I think they were like able to support each other. And like I don't know, like I really like this book, and I would definitely recommend it if any of those tropes or like things sound interesting to you.
Yeah, I definitely think, spoiler alert, this is another book that was in the top 3 books that we recommended to
here you go.
Yeah, I definitely think that, you know, this was like one of the only romances that I think I've read where the 2 people as a whole are whole adults and aren't actually codependent.
For real. Yeah.
Which is like wild. Like that's a wild thing to have in a romance book, I think. And yeah, like you said, it really added to the experience.
And I kind of liked that they were older. Like they were both like I think in their upper 30s or something like that. And I feel like in high school I probably read like college romances and I was like, oh, this is so cute. But I think as I grow older, it's like less appetizing for sure. Yeah.
No, definitely. So the next book is actually a sharp departure for me from sweet romance, but it's The Female of the Species by Mindy McGinnis. And this book was wild from start to finish. So basically, the premise is that the main character, her sister was sexually assaulted and murdered in the past, and the killer was never convicted because they couldn't find enough evidence. And so what she does is that she makes this plan, and she goes out and she kills the killer, and she gets away with it. And then the book starts up kind of after she's gotten away with it, and she kind of knows in her head that like she's like very violent and maybe that's not normal, but like she's done what's right like for her sister in her mind and what's right for her family, and now she's like kind of having to deal with ending school and like, you know, trying to be a normal teenager. And it kind of explores, I guess, really like disturbing but very normal parts of growing up that have a lot to do with like rape culture and victim blaming culture, and it's a little bit hard to read at times because it could be like very triggering for people. Like there's a lot of, for instance, there's a situation where one of the characters, PK, or preacher's kid, gets really angry at another girl for like stealing her boyfriend, or like blames her for something that this boy did. Like he was the one who like went after this girl, and it's like obviously not her fault that he like went after her. And I guess like the way that this is like these topics are discussed, I think is like very powerful. And honestly, I think that this book kind of gets at the heart of like what Promising Young Female was trying to get at so much, because like the main character, she's like outwardly like very like she's very smart, she's very promising, and the book kind of ends up very like explosive and very thrilling. So yeah, I would really recommend it, especially because I'm pretty sure this is the debut novel for the author, and it was just like a shot to the heart.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. What made you pick it up?
It was simply marked as want to read by my sister on
Oh, shout out to your sister.
So,
yeah.
Thanks.
Dang, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on. I feel like can talk forever, so I'll try to speed things up a little bit. Next, I have my only play of the full books that I chose, and it is A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry. Yeah, maybe you had to read this for high school required reading. I didn't happen to, so this is my first time reading it. But yeah, I like went on a trip to Springfield, Illinois at the end of the summer, and literally was in this like amazing bookstore called Prairie Archives. So if you're ever in Springfield, Illinois, I'd recommend it. It just had like newspapers and different collections of things that were like hundreds of years old, and I got this really old edition of the play. And yeah, I don't know, like I guess part of it is just the fact that it's set in Chicago, and it's basically this heartbreaking play of like a family, I think in the 1950s maybe, I could be completely wrong, but yeah, it's set in a time in which like this Black family in Chicago is navigating like a lot of things. Like they have and then like the family comes into a certain sum of money, and they kind of navigate like trying to like move out of their neighborhood and improve their circumstances, but obviously there's like generational wealth gaps and systemic racism and housing disparities in Chicago, and you kind of see the like brutal reality of that. And it's like I can totally see why it was so popular and has become an American classic, just because it represents so well like the realities of the time, and I mean still largely the realities of today as well. So really enjoyed that.
Okay, my next favorite is actually a trilogy. We each have like a series that we're counting as one book, but like we're gonna get over that. We're gonna skip over that. And the trilogy is The Scholomance by Naomi Novik, and I picked up the first book, A Deadly Education, from recommendation from an employee at Powell's Bookstore in Oregon, which if you haven't been to Powell's in Portland, it's an amazing bookstore. It's like literally a block wide. So if you're ever in Portland, Oregon, you should go there. But it's basically a fantasy, dark academia type book that follows a like magic user named Elle, who is kind of like has been told all of her life that she's meant to be a dark magic user, and she befriends like kind of like the hero of the school, and this school is actually wild. I think this is what Harry Potter wishes that it could be. No offense to Harry Potter, but there's just so much world building that has to do with, you know, what's happening with school. The school, for reference, is like kind of trying to like test these children as they're going through it, and it's just an insane amount of world building. And Naomi Novik literally you can tell that she really has been invested in fan culture. I think she's actually like one of the board member for the organization of Transformative Works, which like runs like AO3 and like other like fandom like fanfic type stuff. And yeah, I just think it's really well done. I think it's one of the only books that I read that is by a white author that actually does a good job with diversity and not just like tokenizing characters who are people of color. The book has come under some controversy where in the first book, like there were certain things that were like a little off. Personally, like for some of the stuff that people said about like the Asian character, like actually I don't think that was a problem, and I don't think a lot of like Asian people had a problem with it. And however, like there were some things with like where she was saying like, oh, Maleficaria, which were like the creepy crawlies in the school, could like get in hairstyles like locks, which she's like since apologized for, and that like wasn't a problem in the second two books. So I think it's like fine if you're worried about that and have heard some bad things about it. And I just think like the trilogy is so well done, it's so well built out, and there are a ton of plot twists that I just didn't see coming. Like I buddy read this with a friend, and we were just constantly texting each other during the third book because we were like, whoa, like I didn't see that coming. And it just like builds out to a very explosive end, and it's just like super exciting. I would highly recommend this if anyone's looking to pick up a dark academia YA trilogy.
Dang, yeah. I feel like trilogies are the peak low-key of epic fantasy.
For sure.
Yeah. Like I feel like I really love trilogies. Okay, the next book I have is an autobiography self-titled by Assata Shakur. So yeah, Assata by Assata Shakur. And yeah, if you're not familiar with her, she's a Black revolutionary who was, she grew up in like New York and in Wilmington, North Carolina, and she was also imprisoned for a long time. And yeah, like as a revolutionary who supports like abolition and has had to like fight the police and things like that, she just recounts a lot of the experiences that she's had since her upbringing and being a revolutionary and navigating that. And I don't know, I think like obviously like she's an incredible person, and just the autobiography was like really intense and brutal at many points, but definitely like also super lighthearted, and like that was like kind of surprising to me as well. And I don't know, she has this one quote, sorry, I just have like this paper that I wrote a couple things down on, and it says, "It has always intrigued me how the world can be so beautiful and so ugly at the same time." And I don't know, like I think I truly feel that way a lot of times, especially reading through the stories of these people who are literally at the brink of death, like willing to sacrifice their lives and endure so much for the causes that they believe in. And yeah, they still see so much light in the world, and like there are so many like lighthearted, beautiful moments in the autobiography, of course, but also obviously so many like brutal realities of the world. And yeah, I guess like I have a full review and more reviews on like Goodreads, but yeah, those are definitely like some points I really enjoyed of that book and would highly recommend it just for anyone as just like, yeah, good reading.
I think my next book would have to be Anxious People by Frederick Backman, which, just heads up for you, if you're a working adult and you work at a corporation, I think you will feel a little bit bad after reading it, because I really did. But I think it's very classic Frederick Backman, where it kind of like gives you a little faith in humanity. I think it gives you a little faith in humanity, and in, I guess, people's people's capacity for love for strangers, for compassion for strangers, and to change throughout their lives. I think one of the characters is like introduced as quite a cold, like bank worker character who like kind of doesn't care about the results of her work and her industry impacting so many people, and you kind of get to see her grow through that. But you also get to see like relationship progression for a new couple who is trying to buy the house or buy the apartment, and you get to see, I guess like the premise is that there's a bank robber who's allegedly holed up in this apartment that people were showing. And there is a twist which I definitely didn't see coming, but maybe some other people can see coming because I think my sister said that she did see it. But yeah, I just thought it was a really nice book. The writing style is very like the House on the Cerulean Sea type vibes, like
Love that.
a little bit like, I don't know, like the Mysterious Benedict Society, like that kind of style. And so it's like quite a light read, even though it deals with several like really dark topics. And I just really liked it.
Yeah, and Ellie also got this book for me for my birthday, so I will be reading it at some point soon, and I'm excited to do so because I love anxiety and having anxiety. But yes. All right, the next book I have, which I actually have a copy of right here, because I listened to an audiobook, but after I finished, I was literally obsessed, so I like ran to Barnes & Noble and bought this copy, this beautiful hardcover, but it's called Honey and Spice by Bolu Babalola, and yeah, she's a Nigerian British author, I believe, and the book is set at a university, and follows, sorry, I forgot to mention this is a romance book, but yeah, it follows two main characters, Malachi Korede and Kiki Banjo, and they're kind of like players on campus. Like, Kiki is very avoidant and does not do relationships, and that's kind of her vibe, and she's like whip smart and has like a like radio show, and it's just like really cool and chill, and yeah, there's like numerous like things that they kind of like draw them to each other. There was definitely just like immediate chemistry between them, but also like they have similar like interests. They end up working on a project together, so it's like kind of a slow burn. And also like I just really enjoyed how they like talked about food and like books, and just like, I don't know, their relationship was really beautiful, and like the chemistry was there, and there was so much good banter. Like the banter was like a 12 out of 10. Like I literally was obsessed with both of them, and their romance was just like literally like the icing on the cake. Like they were like really, really amazing characters, and I literally just wanted to be in this like world forever. And yeah, I don't know, like it was definitely one of the best romance books I've ever read. And yeah, I guess like upon reflection, all three of these romance books are like Black romances, and I have tried to diversify my romance taste a little bit for sure. I read a lot of like Helen Huang books, and like, yeah, like I don't know, I was trying out here, but like I'm sorry, like it was just not as good, and like a lot of them I just like fell really flat for me. So yeah, if you have any like recommendations for specifically like Asian romance, queer Asian romance, queer romance, I'll take any suggestions I can get. Like please leave those below. And I definitely really enjoy like, I don't know, like strong chemistry, like, I don't know, banter, like second chance, all of those sorts of tropes. So if that sounds like any book that you could think of, I would love to read it. But yeah.
I will say, I think I kind of came up on the same struggle that you did, where just like some of the romances that were really popping on Goodreads just like fell a little bit flat. Yeah. And I think that is like, I think it is like kind of like when people focus on like, you know, queer romance or like Black romance, or any romance that's not just like simply like two cishet like white people.
Yeah.
I think there is something that's like there that is just like not necessarily in all of the books that are just like 4.5 stars, like 300,000 ratings on Goodreads. Not to say that some of those books aren't good, because my next book is Beach Read by Emily Henry. But like I do think that having like more diversity in the romance genre really helps kind of like, in a way, like focus on the connections and not necessarily the tropes, because I think a lot of times like really resonant tropes with like the specific audience will like fall flat just because it's been very overdone. But yeah, so as I mentioned before, my next book is Beach Read by Emily Henry.
She loves Emily Henry.
I love Emily Henry. Like, I don't know what it is. Like, I've even tried authors for romance that Emily Henry has recommended. Like, I read this year like 5 Tessa Bailey books, but there's something about Emily Henry.
Is this a proud statement or is this a not so proud statement?
I don't know. I think it's both.
Yeah, that's fair.
There is something about Emily Henry. I think Beach Read was just so good. I loved, you know, that they were both writers. I loved that it was kind of like sunshine and grumpy. I love that, you know, Gus like kind of walked back his initial statement about, you know, like thinky thoughts books versus romance books, because I think like that's one of the main things that like gets me going when talking to people about books. Like, our job has a lot of straight cis men, and all of them just like love books that are not romance books, and like it's kind of awkward to bring up loving romance books sometimes, but I think that this book does a really great job of I guess like selling the romance genre from like a romance writer to like a philosophical like deep book writer, which I really liked. And I also thought that, you know, like having the characters like having known each other in college was also like another twist. Like, it was definitely not a second chance romance, but I really liked that, you know, like they had previously like known each other, and like it wasn't until like they moved next to each other that they got together. And I think also something that was really good about this book was that the romance author had sort of like given up on love, because it turned out that her father wasn't faithful after she thought for her whole life that her mom and dad had just like the best romance ever. And it was really nice to kind of see her like come back from that and rediscover romance in a new way. And I just like really loved it.
Very nice. Yeah, definitely. I have not read a lot of Emily Henry, but maybe I will delve into her backlist this year. All right, the next book I have, I'm like debating. Okay, the next book I have was Disability Visibility by Alice Wong. And yeah, I read this with a friend, and it was really incredible. Like, I would recommend it just like as required reading for everyone. If I could recommend it for high schoolers, even as just, you know, basic education, would definitely recommend it. And yeah, it's a collection of contemporary essays by disabled individuals who basically recount like various parts of their lives, or like, yeah, like it was definitely just super eye-opening, and like a really rich collection across like people with various disabilities, and just really highlighting their experiences. And I don't know what else to say, but I think just like the fact that Alice Wong, who's like a disability like activist, was able to put this together and just really highlight these people's experiences and shed light on them was like really incredible. And I was just like, yeah, really grateful to be able to read it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so my next book is Notes on an Execution by Danya. Oh, I don't know if I'm gonna pronounce her last name correctly. I think it's Kufafka. This is a book that was really interesting because it chronicles the lives of women who were affected by this serial killer who is on death row, which is why it's Notes on an Execution. And I think that it does a really good job of kind of exploring the different sides of the debate about the death penalty through the lives of like the women impacted, instead of just like the serial killer. Because I think it's kind of well known by now that like whenever a tragedy happens, people will focus on the perpetrator instead of, you know, supporting the survivors. And I think it was really nice to have a book that really focuses on the survivors and the people who were impacted. And also another thing that I thought was really interesting was not just having like one answer. Like I thought that it was really nice that she explored kind of the differences between people's opinion. Like, for example, one character was like absolutely despised the serial killer and would never forgive him, but she was like, well, I really don't think that he should get the death penalty because he doesn't deserve to like kind of go out and like a blaze of news and like have everyone following this. He deserves to like rot in a cell for like 50 years and like die the most like bland, like no one cares about it death ever, you know? So it's like, it wasn't just like pro death penalty or like against death penalty, but it also explored some of the nuances and I guess like some of the conflicting emotions and the facts behind people's stances. And I thought that that was really powerful. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, very cool. All right. The next book is pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to go too much into it. But I kind of did a little cop-out and just said both of these books. But I guess like, yeah, Carrie Soto's Back / Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is my next book. So I guess just
TJR.
Like, TJR, period. Although I've only read 3 of her books out of like, I believe the 7 that are out. But yeah, I don't think I have to explain them too much. Like everyone is talking about Seven Husbands, and I would say the hype is definitely worth it for me at least. And I really enjoyed both of those stories. I did reread Carrie Soto recently, and I would say it didn't really hold up to what I had like felt in the moment when I like binged it in one sitting, like I don't know, 6 months prior, but still definitely like really enjoyable. And I think her form of storytelling and like just making the books literal crack, like literally addictive, is like something to be studied. Like I don't know what she puts in there, but like they are like really I don't know, easy to read, and the characters are like really interesting, and like I don't know, I feel like that's all you can kind of ask from a book, to be honest. Yeah,
it's true. Yeah, I also recently read Carrie Soto's Back, and I have to say I do get the hype about TJR because I hadn't previously read a TJR book. But yeah, so my next book is Circe by Madeline Miller. I know a lot of people didn't enjoy Circe as much as they enjoyed Song of Achilles. However, I really liked Circe. I think something that's really powerful that's missing a lot of the times from books like that are in this genre, like the Greek retelling, is kind of like I think a lot of the times also it's because like Greek and Roman retellings will be from like men. But there's definitely like an own voices component to Circe that makes it so compelling, where you can really tell how like not even, you know, like explicit acts of discrimination against her or explicit like violence against her like leads to different reactions, but how just like this mountain that's on her of just like everything bad that's happening because of like who she is builds up and like ends up leading her to who she ends up being in the book. And I also think that it's just a really great story of someone persevering and being able to, I guess, like grow into themselves, because I would say at the end of the book she does kind of like grow into herself a little bit through all of this. And I think that it was really nice to see this type of book because I guess like in Song of Achilles, I don't know if there's a lot of like anti-Achilles content out there, but there's definitely a lot of anti-Circe content out there, especially from the source material, right? So I think that I just really liked the fact that this book kind of put a different spin on it, and in a way that felt very like real and very I guess like true to what the experience might have been like for like this mythological figure.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like there's been a lot of really good retellings of Greek mythology recently, and also like I don't know, even like I can think of like so many retellings of like Asian history recently that have been like super true. Good. Yeah,
I think a lot of the like cultural history retellings have been popping off in like 2021 2022.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Alrighty, my next is I think we're nearing the end, hopefully.
Yeah.
This is a really long video. Is My Brother's Husband, which is a manga by Gengora Tagame. And yeah, when I first moved here to Chicago, like one day I was like, let me like go to the library and get a library card. So I like went by myself. This was before I started working, and I went to the manga section, and it was like yay big. Even though the library is like 10 stories. But I found this manga and I was like, oh, this looks kind of cute. And yeah, it was everything I ever wanted. I ended up finishing the entire like collection. And yeah, I guess like, all right, let me like find the names so I don't like misremember them. But yeah, basically it's about these two twins, and one of them is named Ryoji and the other is Yaichi, and Ryoji is gay, and he eventually is kind of estranged from his family and goes to Canada and meets this Canadian white man named Mike Flanagan, and they are like lovers. And like Ryoji dies, but Mike like returns to Tokyo, which is where Ryoji, the twin brother, was from, and basically shows up on this doorstep. And it's kind of the story of Yaichi, who was, you know, the twin brother who kind of like abandoned in many ways his brother because of his queerness, in a country that is oftentimes super closed-minded. And also he has a daughter named Kana, so it's kind of like them three and them navigating, oh wow, like this big burly, I don't know, Canadian man is here, and we're learning more about like their like uncle slash Yaichi's brother and kind of navigating the situations. And it was just really, really warm. Like it felt abundantly warm and made me feel, although like it's a super tough subject, especially in Asia, and one that I think hasn't really been breached as much as it has been recently, which I think has been really awesome to see. It was just like a really, really beautiful story. And yeah, I ended up like reading a bunch of the author's work as well, and had like mixed feelings on a couple other things they're working on, but definitely my favorite manga I've ever read. I don't know exactly what genre of manga this is, but maybe like slice of life queer manga, but definitely like really, really enjoyed that. Yeah.
All right, so next up for me is Malice by Heather Walter, and this is another retelling. I don't know what's up with me and retellings this year. I've just loved them.
Yeah.
But it is a retelling of Sleeping Beauty, and it follows the dark Grace, Alice, and she's kind of like, there's a lot of different world building that's very like separate from Sleeping Beauty, as like, you know, and maybe love it. But she's kind of an outcast, and there are a bunch of Grace houses that work for, you know, people who are very wealthy, people who are in the royal family, and they help them with things like, you know, beauty potions, like, with things like dresses for balls, but also Alice as the dark Grace will help them with things that, you know, will like get at people, like, oh, like give this person warts, like they were rude to me or something like that, you know. And she definitely feels like an outcast because from a young age she was kind of like poked and prodded by scientists, and then in her position in her Grace house she's kind of like simply a cash cow and not actually treated that well.
Yeah.
And it follows her meeting and eventually falling in love with Aurora. And I just thought that, I don't know, like there's just something about the fairy tale retelling, the sapphic romance. I just thought their relationship progression was really beautiful. I think it might also be really nice to read for people who've ever dealt with like body image issues or like body dysmorphia, because like Alice has like always struggled with like, you know, not viewing herself in the best light, and I think that she's like able to see herself in a new light through like kind of discovering more about her own powers and also developing her relationship with Aurora. And I just thought it was a really nice book. It does end on a bit of a cliffhanger though, like maybe the biggest cliffhanger ever. So I read it before the second book had come out. It's a duology, so I was just like deceased until like the second book finally came out.
Yeah.
But yeah, would highly recommend it if you're looking for a fairy tale retelling that isn't like very played out and like tropey.
Yeah, I feel like there's another fairy tale retelling of Sleeping Beauty, like maybe like
There definitely
Gods
is.
or something, but like Katie Roberts. I don't know.
I think that's like Hades and Persephone, but there's also I think she also has one
I think
that's
she
Sleeping
has a
Beauty.
bunch of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting. All right, the last books I'm going to talk about is this bad boy right here. This is the beautiful book Jade City by Fonda Lee. And yeah, shout out to Mina Reeds, who is my favorite booktuber. And she's the one who introduced me to this series. And yeah, this summer I was really bored at one point, and this book and the other 2 books in the series, so it's called the Greenbow Saga. It's made up of 3 books, so Jade City, Jade War, and Jade Legacy. And there's also a like 0.5 book that's like in the same universe that's really good as well. And yeah, like I don't even have words to describe how much I love this book and like this series.
She's obsessed.
In general. Like it's kind of like I feel like these 2 books have become like my core personality, or like I don't know, the things that I would like talk about a lot. So like I don't know, like it's one of those like things that you just like text everyone and tell everyone that you know to like read it, and then they're like shut up, or like they're like this is too long, or like I don't know, my best friend actually like started reading it and finished the series and really enjoyed it, so sometimes it works out. But yeah, the premise of this series, in this first book especially, is the Call family, and yeah, we follow this family that controls part of this island called Kikon, and there's kind of 2 rival families in this in this island, and they're part of the Greenbone clan. And basically in this universe, as the title alludes to, Jade is like this core gem that like you can insert into your body and train and use, but it's only for like families that know how to use it. However, it's like this raw material that is being exploited, and people are trying to distribute it worldwide because it can be used for many purposes, right? Because it's very powerful. So yeah, it's kind of like, how do I describe it? Like Godfather meets like Hong Kong kind of like crime found family sort of vibes, and it's just like it was everything. Like I think for me, I'm a big like I really love found family, and I love like when when all the characters are super interesting and well developed, and you see their progression and you see the dynamics between them, whether it be romantic or familial or like friendship, or I guess there's a lot of power dynamics because they are in a clan in this story. But yeah, I don't know, there's literally just like a cast of characters that I was like so engrossed in this world building and like the story, and just everything was so amazing. Definitely like made me cry and made me want to scream and like feel like every range of emotions. But like literally obsessed, like Fonda Lee, like I'm obsessed with her and like her writing, and we'll read anything she writes. So I think she's coming out with a book this year called Untethered Sky, so I will be reading that. But yeah, we'll definitely be rereading this series this year at some point, and would highly recommend if you like fantasy. Yeah,
I think that wraps it up.
Yeah. I think we have roughly like 22 question mark books. I think it's different because we had the first book that we talked about together.
Shared.
But
yeah.
Thank you guys for watching. And yeah, I don't know. We're gonna try and do like a variety of videos that we just enjoy making and talking about books and things like that. So yeah.
Looking forward to it. All right. Thanks if you sat through.